Okay, so the next question reads, find the first partial derivatives of the function z equals x sine of xy. So partial derivatives pertain to multivariable functions where we calculate the derivative of in terms of one of the variables and keep the other variable constants. I won't get into too much about what partial derivatives mean, but the notation for partial derivatives is this. So it's partial z, partial x. So this means that we're deriving our function only in terms of x. So we keep y to be constant. So what they're asking us is to find the first partial derivative of this function. So we're going to try to find partial x, partial z, partial x, and partial z, partial y. Okay, so that's what we're going to try to find, and this is the notation for it. So what I said before, if we're trying to find partial z, partial x, then we're going to keep y to be constant, right? So we're just going to assume that is a number. Okay, so if our function is z equals x sine of xy, then partial z, partial x is going to be a product function or a product rule, right? So we have to consider that this is a product of two different functions, the first function being x and the second function being sine of xy, right? So we have to do the derivative of the first function. So the derivative of the first function is 1 times sine of xy plus the derivative of the second function times the first function, which is going to be, the derivative of sine is going to be cos of xy. And also this is a chain rule, so we have to include that the derivative of yx is just going to be y. So this is going to be sine xy plus xy cos xy. So we see here that we kept the y to be a constant and we just treated it as such, right? So we just use the product rule and the chain rule for the second part of the product rule. Okay, so now we're going to try to find partial z, partial y. So now we see here that this is just a chain rule. So we're going to calculate the derivative of sine xy, and then we're going to calculate the derivative of xy. Okay, so this derivative of sine xy is going to be cos xy. We have to make sure that we keep it x here. And the derivative of xy is just x. So we get x squared cos xy. So we see here with the partial derivative in terms of y, we kept x to be constant and we just treated it as such. So in this case, we just used a chain rule. So we calculated the derivative of the sine function first, and then we multiplied that by the derivative of xy. Okay, so these are the first partial derivatives, right? So if we were to calculate the second partial derivatives, then we'll have to derive in terms of x or y in which way we want it to, and we have to derive our partial derivatives further. And that's where we can come to conclusions such as mixed derivatives, which are second partial derivatives or even further, which were partially derived in x and partially derived in y. So that's what we call mixed partial derivatives, but we're not going to get into too much about that. So other than that, the solution is correct and we can move on.